My name is Campbell. I've had a transplant 3.5 years ago. Prior to that, my first problem started 15 years ago when I had bladder cancer. That then developed eventually into cancer of the kidneys. I'd lost one kidney, lived on one kidney quite happily for 5 years, and then unfortunately cancer got into the second kidney and I had to have the second kidney removed. Once that was removed, obviously I was on dialysis immediately, and was on dialysis for approximately just over 3 years before I had the transplant. I was actually on dialysis when I got the call. It wasn't a call so much as it was a visit from my doctor, and she came down and said to me, "How are you feeling? Are you feeling all right?" Because I had had a cold just a few days prior to the day. And she said, "I want you to just stay there for a moment and I'll go and make a call." She went and made a call, came back a few minutes later and said, "We have a kidney for you." And obviously it's extremely overwhelming to think that you're lucky enough to have that kidney. And then of course there was a fairly urgent need to get to the hospital to get this transplant. I was able to go to the hospital very, very quickly. As we got there and went through the various tests, we found out that I was not the first one in line for this kidney. As a matter of fact, I was 5th in line. The 4 people ahead of me, one person they couldn't contact, one person had a cold, another person had a spot on the lung when they had their x-rays done, and I'm not sure what happened to the other one. So I was very, very lucky to get the transplant, and we were sort of rushed through to get the transplant because the age of the kidney at this stage, it had been from the donor, it had been out of the donor's body for 18 hours at this stage and was really getting very desperate to get it transplanted into someone. So everything went well with the transplant. I woke up the next morning and I felt so good when I woke up. I couldn't believe that we'd even had the transplant. I felt so wonderful. I couldn't believe the difference from one night to the next morning. The days following the surgery were just very, very normal really. It was rehabilitation, getting up and going for a walk on the first day. I was sitting up in bed the day after the transplant, eating breakfast and just feeling wonderful. Walked around the hospital corridors constantly. I'd been walking many, many times prior to the transplant, so my fitness was as good as it possibly could be, ready for the transplant. And once I'd had the transplant, I was determined to make sure that I got the most out of it. So I just exercised as much as I could within the corridors, walking, doing all the right things, and being able to eat again, actually having an appetite, was just amazing. Drug regime was interesting, because every level of drug that you're on is a fairly high level, and you have to learn what each drug is for and understand why you're taking these drugs. So it was quite a learning curve, and of course they don't want you to leave the hospital until you're quite familiar with what you're taking and why you're taking it. And it was fairly easy to get the hang of it. Didn't have any problems with drugs at all. I developed a situation where I wanted to know as much as I could about dialysis, about transplantation, and just to know as much as I possibly could know, because the doctors can only do so much. It's got to be a two-way street. The patient has to do as much as they can to help the doctor, and by finding out as much knowledge as you can, that certainly makes it easier for a patient to understand why a doctor needs to do things, and just generally makes the whole transplant operation much, much better. I'd spent a lot of time learning as much as I could about every part of kidney disease, organ donation, transplantation. I was very, very lucky to live next to a retired doctor who had written a paper on transplantation and organ donation. And between myself and this doctor, we discussed a lot of things. My transplant was from a deceased person, and it was not the best match 0 out of 6. There's 6 criteria that they look for. I had a 0 out of 6. I was 5th in line, so it wasn't a good match. But they were quite happily going to go ahead with the transplant because they felt the drugs that they have now are quite capable of dealing with that mismatch. And as it's turned out, I've never had any rejection whatsoever. The transplant has just been absolutely wonderful. When I first had the transplant, having someone else's organ in your body is quite an emotional thing, and still today I still get emotional when I think about it, as I am now. But it's something that I felt I owed it to that person to make the most of my life. They've gone to the trouble of donating their organ. For me not to follow the doctor's orders, take the drugs, live a healthy lifestyle is just not doing the right thing for your donor. So, as well as for me. But it's more so you're doing it for your donor, yourself, your family. It's just a part of everything. It's everybody's help and everybody's assistance that puts it all together. And I might say without the help of family and friends, I would never have got through dialysis, the transplant, and the whole situation would never have happened without their support. If I had any advice to give for anyone that was going to go through this sort of journey, I would say the number one thing is to learn as much as you possibly can about dialysis, kidney failure, and transplantation. Understand what you as a patient are required to do. The doctors are only performing an operation on you. You have to do the most you possibly can to help them. Without your help, you may not have such a successful transplant as I've had, but the more you learn, the more you understand, the better you will get through the whole situation. I think you can become obsessed, but it's a good obsession. I make sure that I maintain my weight, I maintain a healthy eating style, I make sure that I have a healthy life in general. I try not to get stressed over things. I make sure that I always take my tablets on time, every time. All those sorts of things. It does become an obsession that when you go out, if you're going out somewhere for dinner, the first thing you do is get your tablets ready to take with you so that you don't possibly forget them. What you're going to have for dinner is secondary. Everything revolves around what you need to do with your transplant. How are you going to look after that? I probably would say that it has changed me. It's certainly given me an outlook where I know that transplantation is not forever. I know that one day it may well happen that the kidney fails. And I really want to make sure that I live as much of my life as I can while I have a healthy kidney, and I don't want to waste that time. So I'm happy with that.
Being the wife of somebody who'd been sick for a long time means you adjust your life according to what the needs are at the time. Our journey was very much a roller coaster with many operations, all very serious, all very major operations. Then Les would recover from that and we'd have a good flow of life for a while, and then we'd be facing another operation. So it was very much a roller coaster. And how we coped I really don't know sometimes, but we did. I think you learn a coping mechanism. It's a journey, and you don't know how you're going to cope until you're faced with these things. I found I was very aware of the impact of what we were going through on other family members as well. So I saw my role as building the family up, as well as trying to maintain it myself, as well as trying to maintain Les's positive attitude, which most of the time he had. Very few occasions he needed boosting, but I had to be the one that boosted him when he needed it. I didn't think I was ever a particularly strong person, but I guess you learn to build that strength up as you go along.
If you had to give advice to carers, what would you say?
Stay strong, stay positive as a carer, your husband, wife really needs you, and they need your positive vibes. Try not to fall apart yourself. See light at the end of the tunnel, even if it's a dim one, and just believe that you're going to get through, and that the doctors are going to get your loved one through.